Well, hello and welcome back. Today I want to speak to those of you that have a podcast or are thinking of starting a podcast, and for my other listeners that don't have a podcast, because I really want to share with you about social media, really. Social media podcasting, but really social media. What you should be doing on your social, okay? So if you haven't heard my previous podcast, which is all about podcast marketing for podcasters, then I recommend you actually go and listen to that. Otherwise, keep on listening. Hey, I'm Veronica Polo, and with more than 15 years being a marketing strategist, you're going to experience the new way to promote your business with clear and unique messaging by giving you actionable marketing and messaging strategies that get you interested leads to transform the lives of your audiences so that you build up your brand with continuous momentum. Get ready, because here's where we say no to outdated marketing strategies and society norms, and we say yes to change from the inside out. Welcome to the Branding Momentum Podcast. Okay, so I've recently heard a podcast expert say, you can't grow a podcast with a podcast. Wow. That is so true. Unfortunately, many people believe, let's make a podcast and people will come. And they won't. And this is the same thing about posting, and it's related, honestly, or a video. It's the same thing. Creating a podcast episode and not promoting it, that just won't help you get more listeners. That just won't work, right? So what it can, and when it can work for you, is to better understand who your audience is. Who are your listeners? Who is your audience? Obviously, you should know this, because your podcast should be specific and niche and in some way, in order to differentiate yourself from other podcasts like yours. So you should definitely already know this from the beginning, right? And this specific and niche and specialization is what will actually differentiate you on social media. So the way to know how you can build this is to analyze your own choices. Think of your favorite podcasts, like that you love to listen to, and how do they show up on social media. Look at all their graphics and their videos. What do you like? What you don't like? What makes you be attracted to them? What makes you cringe, right? Think of everything that you can think of. And maybe if you want, take a piece of paper and say what I like and what I don't like. Now, with that in mind, let's say you've done your research, okay? And your next step should be this next question. How am I going to help promote my podcast? Well, the first thing is that your podcast thumbnail and cover is not your promotion. So your podcast name won't do much for people. So the images and the graphics and the videos is what will definitely help you, create a brand and create awareness. So your profile bio on Instagram or on TikTok should be very specific. Don't assume people know what the podcast is about. Don't be clever. Don't be cheeky. Don't be, smart ass or anything. Don't be. Don't assume people know. People don't know you. People are going to get to know you. So whatever words you put is what will determine if they feel connected to what you're saying on that bio. Think of it as if, what's the purpose of the podcast? Why should they actually tune in? And why should they actually click the link to see more? Now, the images and the videos can be a mixture. It depends on what type of podcast you want to have. So if you have a podcast that is a video podcast, then for sure having reels or video or short clips is perfect. But give me a cover. You say, why a cover? Why do I need to have a cover for a podcast when I already have a podcast cover, right? Because if you're browsing for content to watch, you want to attract the right audience that will actually benefit from your episode. So tell them what it's all about, or share a quote in the cover. Of course, if you're already doing video podcasting, you must probably already be on YouTube. And if you're not, then that's where you need to be. And you're obviously going to be creating little shorts or sneak peeks about that particular podcast episode. And you're going to be repurposing that if you want, of course. Depends where your audience actually lives. You're going to be repurposing that into your Instagram, your TikTok, or your Pinterest, because these are places where videos are doing great. So the key to any podcast video is that whatever you're sharing as a sneak can also be shareable to others, right? So you want people to share it, but you also want people to watch your long form videos if you are creating video podcasting. Now, the images or the graphics is pretty much the same. Like funny memes and quotes from the episode are great ways also to represent and showcase your podcast. Don't make a feed with your podcast cover repeated many times. But again, your podcast cover is not considered to be a graphic. That's why it is simply just your podcast cover, your podcast thumbnail. Another alternative is that you can also change your podcast cover every week. That is actually what we do here. And we do it because I love change. I like to change things up. I don't like the same kind of look every week or the same cover all the time. But that's just me. And I can do that because I have a team behind me. But I realized that we were creating these podcast posts for each week. And I realized, like, why don't we just simply use that as our cover to showcase that episode? So it's the same thing as if you're already doing it every week. Why not simply do it, for example, if you have a YouTube thumbnail? If you're doing videos, you are obviously creating thumbnails for your YouTube videos every week. So this is the same thing for my podcast. Each episode has its own look, has its own image. I'm not using my podcast cover as my image. Why? Because it's part of my brand. And I felt, in a way, if I have the time and we have the energy and we have the creative part, why not take into account, and we're not that lazy in that way. So the way that I see it, as for you to put your content on Instagram right now, is that your reels should actually create brand awareness, right? Your carousels should create engagement for people to save them and shares, right? Your stories should create a community building. And your images, it will actually depend for the context that you are putting them out. Maybe they're memes, maybe they're quotes, but you have to switch them around. So I want to share this information, which is, I think, very relevant to whoever is listening to. So there is a study done by this company called Metricool, and we actually use it in their company to schedule our social media post, okay? And you can get actually the free version. But they have an article that they wrote about what's going on Instagram. And as of October 2023, in that article, it says that if your reels are declining, it's because many big companies are now using reels. So if you're a small account on Instagram, your reels are declining. But the views on your stories have increased. So that means you need to also be creating more stories using, stickers and polls and questions and sharing the links of your podcast there. Because in the end, what you want is to get people into your DMs as well, right? You want to be able to share links to your podcast and have more in-depth conversations with your listeners so that they can become a lead or a potential client. And if you have a decent following, you can use your channel broadcast to share everything there as well. Also, another interview from Adam Mosseri, and he said that people on Instagram are actually spending more time on their DMs. And then the second place where they're spending more time is in their stories. And the third place that they're spending more time is in their reels. So if that is what people are actually doing, then we should actually apply this to our social media strategy right now, right? Yes. So what I will do is I'm going to leave you both links from the blog and the interview where you can actually see everything and listen. But besides everything that I have said, promoting your podcast on social media, it would only determine if you actually do it consistently. Don't rely simply on, having an episode and praying for people to listen to it. No, I am sorry. There needs to be a lot more work. There needs to be more things around. Another thing that you could do for podcasting, trying to push your numbers at the beginning, is to get into Facebook groups, okay? We did it in the past. Sometimes we still do it, okay? But we've went into all these podcast groups and promoted. We were self-promoting in very light ways for people to actually listen to our podcast. But not only listen to it, we also wanted to get reviews. So if this is something you haven't been doing, but you've been thinking, then go ahead and do it, because this will also help you promote better from the get-go your podcast. But please don't forget to listen to the other episode that I did about podcasters and podcasting. Okay? All right. I am tired and I'm going to go, and I'm going to leave you with this, and I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you same time, same place next week.